The forest had a way of whispering secrets to those who were still enough to hear them. Tall pines swayed under a gray October sky, their needles trembling like they knew something the rest of the world didn't. Wind moved through the mountains like a sigh, long, slow, and full of memory. It was on that trail, 23 miles north of Fairhaven, Oregon, that 68-year-old Walt Jennings vanished without a trace. He wasn't young, wasn't lost. He knew these trails better than his own front porch. A Vietnam veteran, retired postal worker, and stubborn as a mule, Walt had hiked this stretch every fall for the last 40 years. Rain or shine, same old boots, same old backpack. But this time, he didn't come back. All they found was his handheld recorder. It was resting on a mossy stump, still warm from the sun. Its tiny red light blinking. Still running. Sheriff Dana Bell, herself born and raised in Fairhaven, sat in the patrol truck that evening, listening to Walt's last recording. The forest crackled with leaves underfoot, then silence. Then Walt's voice, low, worn, deliberate. "If anyone finds this, I want you to know something. I need to set the record straight. About my brother. About what happened back in '69. Then came the strangest part. A sound soft but chilling, like a voice echoing from deep in the trees. But no words. Just the echo. Then nothing. Fairhaven wasn't the kind of place that forgot its people. Tucked between the coast and the Cascade foothills, it had 2 diners, 1 church, and more memories than streetlights. Folks there remembered when the lumber mill still roared and when the high school football team made state back in '83. But most of all, they remembered the Jennings brothers, Walt and Danny. In 1969, Walt was 13 months back from Vietnam. Quiet. Older than his 24 years. Danny was the dreamer, tall, blue-eyed, always humming Springsteen before Springsteen was big. They were inseparable growing up, the kind of brothers that made folks nod and say, "Now that's family." But in July of that year, Danny vanished too, just like Walt would decades later. Only difference was, Danny had been 18. Just a kid. Last seen heading up Ridgepoint Trail with his guitar strapped to his back, talking about heading to California. The sheriff at the time, old Bill Marston, said he'd likely run off to chase music and women. No foul play suspected. That's what they all said. But Walt never bought it. He searched the woods for months. Took leave from the post office. Went door to door. Even slept out near the ridge, hoping for a sign. But Danny never came back. And Fairhaven did what small towns do best. They whispered, they moved on, and they buried their heartbreaks beneath Sunday potlucks and high school reunions. Until now. Sheriff Dana Bell had heard her share of strange things in the woods. Coyotes that howled like babies, couples who claimed to see ghost lights over the ridge, even a man who swore he saw Bigfoot near Maple Creek. But nothing rattled her like the sound on that recorder. She replayed Walt's voice over and over that night. There was pain in it, the kind that sits deep in a man's chest and never quite leaves. She'd known Walt her whole life. He'd given her Tootsie Rolls when she was just a kid hanging around the post office. Taught her how to tie a proper bootlace. He wasn't the kind to make things up. That next morning, Dana brought the recorder to Ellie Simmons, the town librarian and unofficial historian. Ellie was in her 70s now but sharp as ever. When she heard Walt's voice and that strange echo, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "That's Ridgepoint," she said quietly. "I'd swear it. There's an old tree up there, the one they call Widow's Watch. It echoes like that when the wind hits just right. Danny loved that spot." Ellie leaned in, lowering her voice. "You know, Dana, Walt always said Danny never left town. He said someone made sure of it. That settled it." Sheriff Bell called in a search crew, not for a missing hiker, but for a man who'd been gone for 56 years. And maybe, just maybe, a ghost looking to be heard. The morning fog rolled in thick over Ridgepoint Trail as Sheriff Bell and her team began the climb. Most of them were volunteers, retired firefighters, 2 forest rangers, and a few stubborn locals who remembered Walt like family. They found Walt's footprints near Widow's Watch, clear as day in the damp soil. Next to them were deeper impressions, like he'd stopped and knelt. And then, nothing. No drag marks, no scuffle, just an end. As if he'd vanished into thin air. Back in town, Ellie Simmons dug out a box from her basement labeled Jennings, 1969. Inside, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, even a photo of Danny leaning against a tree with his guitar, smiling, carefree. And at the very bottom, a letter. Unsent. Addressed to Walt. Walt, if you find this, it means I couldn't say goodbye in person. I had to go. I heard things, saw things I wasn't supposed to. Someone's been watching me since the town meeting. Don't come after me, brother. They'll come for you too. The letter wasn't signed. But the handwriting, Ellie recognized it. It was Danny's. She brought it to Dana, hands trembling. He didn't run off, Dana. He was scared. And he was right. Walt never stopped coming after him. Even after everyone else forgot. And now, decades later, Walt had followed his brother to the very same place. But why? And who, or what, had been waiting? By mid-afternoon, the clouds had split open, and a steady drizzle soaked the ridge. Sheriff Bell's boots sank into the mud as she scanned the clearing around Widow's Watch. Nothing but trees, silence, and the smell of pine needles and wet moss. Then Ranger Kyle, a wiry man with a deep respect for the land, called out, "Sheriff! You're gonna want to see this." Half buried beneath the undergrowth, tangled in roots, was a rusted tin lunchbox. Dana pried it loose carefully. Inside, wrapped in plastic and cloth, was a faded photograph. 2 teenage boys grinning at the base of the Widow's Watch tree. Walt and Danny. Behind them, just barely visible in the background, was another man. Older. Dressed in sheriff's khakis. No one had noticed him in the photo before. But Dana did. Her heart dropped. "That's Sheriff Marston," she whispered. "From back then." Kyle frowned. "The one who closed Danny's case?" "Yeah," Dana nodded. "The one who told everyone Danny ran off to California. The one who never let Walt reopen the case." The team fell silent. Something unspoken hung heavy in the air, suspicion, maybe guilt. The kind of realization that made your stomach twist. Maybe someone in town hadn't just failed to find Danny, maybe they never wanted to. The rain picked up. Sheriff Bell stood and looked toward the trail. "Keep looking. And tell me if you find anything else. We're not stopping. Not until we bring them both home." That night, the rain softened to a hush, and Fairhaven's streets glistened under the street lamps like old glass. Sheriff Bell couldn't sleep. Something about that photo gnawed at her. She'd grown up hearing tales of Sheriff Bill Marston. Big Bill, they'd called him. War hero. Town protector. But there had always been whispers, even if no one dared say them loud. She drove to the old Marston house on Birch Street. It had sat empty for nearly 15 years, ever since Bill died in his sleep. No wife, no kids, just a mountain of old files and a locked attic. Dana had inherited the key when she took office. She'd never used it. Not until now. The attic creaked like it remembered everything. Dust danced in her flashlight's beam as she pushed past boxes labeled "Evidence, Old Payroll," and one marked "Jennings." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were Danny's missing person report, several undeveloped rolls of film, and a map of Ridgepoint Trail, with a section circled in red. Scribbled in the margin were the words, "Keep quiet." He saw. Dana's breath caught. Taped beneath the box lid was a smaller envelope, yellowed and sealed with wax. It was addressed in Marston's handwriting. "To be opened only if Walt asks again." She slid her pocket knife beneath the seal and unfolded the letter inside. What she read changed everything. The letter was short. No dates. No names. Just a confession written in the unsteady scrawl of a dying man. "I told myself I was protecting the town. That if people knew what Danny found, there'd be blood in the streets. He came to me scared, said he saw something near Ridgepoint, cash changing hands, men with no badges burying something near Widow's Watch. Government plates. No questions. He was just a boy, but smart enough to know it was dirty. They told me to make it go away. Said it was bigger than us. One phone call, and he was gone. Quiet, clean. But Walt wouldn't let it go. He kept digging. I warned him. God knows I warned him. I've lived with the guilt every day. I see Danny's face in my sleep. I see Walt's too. One wouldn't stop looking. The other wouldn't stop hiding. No signature. No full names. But Dana felt the weight of it hit like a cold river. Sheriff Marston had known all along. Danny hadn't run away, he'd been silenced. And Walt had been chasing the truth his entire life. But something didn't add up. If Walt knew, why go back now? Why hike all the way to Ridgepoint with a recorder? Unless he didn't go there to get lost. He went to leave something behind. Dana glanced back at the recorder still sitting on her desk. Blinking. Waiting. She pressed play again. And this time, she listened differently. The static was faint, like wind passing through tall grass. Then Walt's voice returned, raspy, low, but steady. A voice worn thin by time and grief. I know this thing's recording. If you're hearing it, you probably found my pack by now. Maybe even the picture. He sighed, and you could hear him sit down, the crunch of leaves, the creak of old knees. I came back here 'cause I never got to tell the truth. About Danny. About me. About what it cost us both. He didn't leave to chase music. He left 'cause he saw something he shouldn't have. I didn't believe him at first. Thought maybe he was smoking that funny stuff, seeing ghosts in the trees. But then I saw it too. Black trucks. Men with radios and guns. Something buried up here under cover of night. There was a long pause. A bird called in the background. He tried to blow the whistle. And someone buried him instead. Another pause. This one heavier. Sadder. I spent my whole damn life walking these woods, hoping I'd hear his voice again. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe grief can do that to a man. But I swear, sometimes I'd feel him near. In the wind. In the trees. In the echo that answers when you cry out for someone you miss. And then softer, barely a whisper. I ain't scared anymore, Danny. If you're listening. I'm ready. The recording ended there. And for the first time in years, Sheriff Bell felt tears spill down her cheeks. Walt hadn't just gone missing. He'd gone home. The next morning, the search team returned to Widow's Watch. This time, Sheriff Bell brought a cadaver dog, an old bloodhound named Murphy, half-deaf but still sharp when it mattered. He sniffed the rusted lunchbox, circled the base of the ancient pine, then let out a mournful bark and began to dig. 6 inches down, the earth changed. Softer, disturbed. They found the first bones in a shallow grave, wrapped in what remained of a military-issued blanket. A scrap of denim. A corroded guitar pick. And beside it all, a rusted dog tag, Daniel Jennings. Sheriff Bell knelt by the grave, hat in hand, the wind teasing the hem of her coat. Everyone stood silent, even the woods. Kyle whispered, "You think Walt knew he was buried here?" Dana didn't answer right away. She stared into the trees, her voice caught between heartbreak and awe. "I think he felt it. Like some part of him never left this spot." Further down the trail, they found Walt's pack, neatly placed, like he knew he wouldn't be needing it again. Inside, a folded note, a photo of him and Danny as kids, and a worn, dog-eared Bible with a single verse underlined. "And the truth shall set you free." John 8 verse 32. Walt hadn't come here to vanish. He came to finish what his brother started. And in the end, the mountain echoed back. Back in Fairhaven, word spread like wildfire. The town gathered for a small memorial service at the community hall, where old friends and strangers alike shared stories of Walt and Danny, stories of laughter, loss, and love. Ellie Simmons stood at the front, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "Sometimes," she said, "truth isn't just about facts. It's about healing the wounds that time tried to cover up. Walt and Danny's story reminds us that the past isn't something to be buried, it's something to be understood. Sheriff Bell watched as Walter's sister, Marlene, clutched a faded photograph, her eyes shining with tears and something else, a quiet gratitude. "For years I thought my brothers were lost forever," she whispered. "Now I know they were waiting for us to find them." In the days that followed, townsfolk began to open up, sharing memories long tucked away. They spoke of secrets held tight, sacrifices made in silence, and the kindness Walt showed to anyone who needed a hand. For a small town marked by hardship, the closing of the mill, veterans struggling with memories, families torn apart, this story was a second chance. A reminder that even in the darkest places, there can be light. And sometimes it comes from the echo of a voice that never stopped calling home. The Jennings brothers' story had settled like dust on the shelves of Fairhaven's collective memory. But for those who lived it, time had etched deeper lines on their faces and hearts. Walter and Danny grew up in a world where men came back from war changed, sometimes broken. Walt's own battles didn't end with Vietnam. He wrestled with loneliness, with the silence his brother left behind, and with the gnawing sense that some truths were too dangerous to tell. Marlene, the youngest sibling, remembered those quiet dinners when Walt would stare out the window, eyes distant, lost in memories the rest of them couldn't share. "He carried the weight of all our hopes and fears," she said softly. "But he never let it crush him." For many in Fairhaven, aging was a slow surrender to pain and loss. Jobs disappeared, families moved away, and the future seemed like a fading photograph. Yet Walt found purpose in the wilderness, in those long hikes, in the echoing silence where he felt closest to Danny. He was trying to heal, Marlene added, to make sense of a world that never made sense to him. As the seasons turned, the town began to see Walt not just as a lost man, but as a symbol of endurance, of sacrifice, and of the quiet courage it takes to face the ghosts of your past. Fairhaven had its share of struggles, aging veterans battling invisible scars, families torn apart by economic hardship, and a growing sense of isolation that settled like a fog over the town. But amidst the hardship, Walt's story inspired small acts of kindness that rippled quietly through the community. Ellie Simmons, who had spent decades preserving the town's history, started a new project, a memorial garden at the base of Widow's Watch. It was a place for reflection, for those who lost loved ones to find peace. Volunteers from all generations showed up with shovels, flowers, and stories to share. Old veterans gathered there, sharing memories of battles fought overseas and battles fought at home. They talked openly about their struggles with loneliness and the challenge of finding connection in their later years. Marlene began organizing weekly lunches at the community center, a chance for seniors to come together, to talk, to laugh, to heal. Sheriff Bell, too, found new purpose. She worked to bring more resources to the town, mental health programs, veteran support groups, and community outreach. Walt's journey had reminded Fairhaven that healing wasn't just about finding the missing, it was about finding each other. In the quiet moments between the hustle of the memorial garden and the buzz of community lunches, Sheriff Bell reflected on the secrets that had long haunted Fairhaven. The town had been a place of silence, not just about the missing brothers, but about what truly happened in the shadows of Ridgepoint Trail. She remembered the stories her father had told her, stories of men who returned from war changed, carrying burdens no one could see. Of the way small towns sometimes protected their own by turning blind eyes to uncomfortable truths. The revelation about Sheriff Marston had shaken her. How many others had kept quiet, fearing the consequences of speaking out? How many lives had been shaped, or shattered, by silence? Yet, in confronting the past, Dana saw something hopeful. The courage it took to break that silence was the first step toward justice and healing. At the community hall, she spoke quietly during a town meeting. "We owe it to Walt, to Danny, and to ourselves to never let fear keep us from telling the truth. Only then can we truly move forward." Her words settled into the room like a promise, one Fairhaven intended to keep. Walter Jennings had lived a life shaped by sacrifice, the kind you don't see in medals or ceremonies but in the quiet moments no one notices. He gave up dreams so others could have peace. He bore the pain of loss so his family wouldn't drown in it. His years in Vietnam taught him that justice wasn't always swift or fair. Sometimes it was slow, creeping through the cracks of time, coming back when you least expect it. Walt knew that better than anyone. He had sacrificed his own happiness trying to protect Danny, and perhaps, in the end, he sacrificed himself to uncover the truth. Marlene often wondered if Walt's hikes were a way to carry that sacrifice, walking the trails like penance, like a ritual to keep Danny's memory alive. Each step was a testament to love and loyalty that outlasted death. "Some sacrifices don't get recognized," she told Ellie one afternoon. "But they still matter. Especially when no one else will carry the burden." In the forest, beneath the rustling pines, those sacrifices whispered back, as echoes that refused to be silenced. One chilly afternoon, as the memorial garden was blooming with late spring flowers, a man appeared at the community center. He was in his late 60s, with graying hair and eyes that held the weight of years lived elsewhere. He introduced himself as James Porter, a former federal investigator who had been quietly watching the case from afar. "I knew about Danny," he said, voice low. "And I knew Walt was coming back. I couldn't step in before, too many powerful people involved. But now there's a chance for real justice." Sheriff Bell listened carefully. James spoke of a long-buried scandal involving illegal logging, corruption, and ties to government agents who'd operated with impunity in the 1970s. Danny had stumbled onto something dangerous, a hidden web that stretched far beyond Fairhaven. "This isn't just about two missing brothers," James warned. "It's about a system that tries to bury the truth and the people brave enough to dig it up." His presence shook the town's fragile peace, but also renewed hope that the story wouldn't end with just memories and echoes. The weeks that followed were tense. Sheriff Bell and James Porter worked together, poring over old case files, interviewing townsfolk who had once stayed silent. Some doors closed in their faces. Others opened just enough to let out a whisper of the past. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Cascades, Dana met with Marlene at the community hall. "I'm scared," Marlene admitted, her voice trembling. "What if digging up all this makes things worse? What if the people responsible are still out there?" Dana took her hand gently. "I understand. But if we don't face the shadows, they'll never stop haunting us. Walt and Danny deserved better. And so does this town." The night air was cool, but their resolve burned brighter than ever. Together, they vowed to shine a light on the dark corners, no matter what it cost. As the investigation deepened, the town of Fairhaven began to change, not just in the way it remembered Walt and Danny, but in how its people connected with one another. Loneliness, that old invisible weight many carried, began to lift. Neighbors who'd passed each other with quiet nods started stopping to talk. Veterans shared their stories over coffee. Families rediscovered old photos and letters, bridging the gaps time had carved. Marlene noticed how even her own children, who'd grown distant over the years, returned for the memorial and the healing that followed. One afternoon, she sat beside Ellie in the garden. "I think Walt's story gave us something we forgot how to do, to reach out and hold on." Ellie smiled softly. "That's the real gift. The second chance we all need, no matter our age." In the quiet of the garden, the past and present intertwined, a living testament to the power of reconnection and hope. In the months that followed, the truth began to ripple beyond Fairhaven's borders. The illegal logging ring was exposed, and a few corrupt officials faced indictments. Not all were brought to justice, but the momentum was undeniable. Sheriff Bell often thought about karma, that quiet force balancing the scales over time. Walt and Danny had paid a heavy price, but in the end, their story sparked change. Marlene visited the old widow's watch tree one last time, tracing her fingers over the bark, feeling the pulse of the land beneath her. "Some things take time to heal," she whispered. "But they always do." In town, kindness became contagious. People looked out for one another. The veterans' support groups grew, and families found strength in community. Fairhaven learned that justice isn't always swift or loud. Sometimes, it's a gentle echo, returning when the time is right. The following spring, Marlene decided to hike Ridgepoint Trail herself. It was something Walt had dreamed of doing, a pilgrimage of sorts, and she wanted to understand the place where her brother's stories had begun and ended. As she climbed through the thick pines and moss, the air smelled of earth and rain, of history and memory. At Widow's Watch, she paused, the wind brushing her face gently like a familiar touch. She pulled out the worn photograph of Walt and Danny, the one found in the rusted lunchbox, and held it close. "I finally see," she said aloud, her voice soft but steady. "This place holds more than secrets. It holds love, sacrifice, and hope. You two weren't just lost, you were leading us home." Marlene knelt, placing fresh flowers beneath the ancient tree, a final tribute to the brothers who had given everything. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, a distant echo rippled through the forest, the faintest whisper of a voice calling back through time. Fairhaven never forgot Walt and Danny Jennings. Their story became more than a mystery solved, it became a testament to the resilience of family, the strength found in facing the past, and the quiet power of second chances. Sheriff Dana Bell stood once more at the edge of Widow's Watch, now bathed in the golden light of an early autumn afternoon. The memorial garden flourished nearby, its blooms a living tribute to the lives lost and found. She thought about the echoes Walt spoke of, those whispers carried on the wind, the voices of those who came before, and the stories that refused to be silenced. In a world often shadowed by loneliness, sacrifice, and the scars of history, there was something comforting in knowing that love transcended time. That even when a voice fades, its echo remains, waiting to be heard again. And so, in the hearts of those left behind, Walt's final message lived on. "I ain't scared anymore. I'm ready." The mountains held their silence once more, but for those who listened, the echo never died.